Kristen Kifer. Kristen and I never spoke much. It wasn't needed. We would turn our heads towards each other and look into the face of the other. This is how we communicated, by turning our attention to the other, studying expression and body language, looking, waiting, and then suddenly a smile would simultaneously slide across our faces. We agreed. Mischief. Kristen had a sense of play. She was quiet. She used little grunts in her face and body to communicate. She was half wild, untamed, white blonde, and tiny. We would often touch hands. We used touch to communicate. We indicated little preferences through looks, hand taps, little muffled sounds, like little wild pets. Kristen rivaled me in smallness. I was tiny, end of every line, front of every picture, but Kristen was smaller, which was a remarkable feat. Teachers would actually mark on this. "Oh, look! Kristen is even smaller than Beth," they would squeal, and they would make a face. I could never tell what their faces meant, a cross between endearment and pity. But what was to be pitied? Being so terribly small, or losing your spot as the smallest? I was also now not the most delayed child in the class. I was bigger and less delayed. Sure, I couldn't read, tell time, count to 100, and speak without switching R's for W's, but I was less delayed than Kristen. She just grunted. She never spoke. Once, close to the time that Kristen moved away, the day after a sleepover, when Kristen had left my house, my mother remarked how Kristen had come with a baby sleeping bag. A sleeping bag for a baby. I thought my mother was absolutely fucking crazy. Who puts a baby in a sleeping bag? Kristen lived in a small row house. We would often play in the parking lot or the little patches of grass that were walled off by low concrete curbs. The parking lot was hot in the summer, and it left ugly gray pebbles on the backs of our thighs. So we passed the hours in the grass, looking at grass, bugs, clouds, feeling the grass, the coolness, the gritty pebbles. The breeze would shift and blow Kristen's fine hair across her face, unnoticed by her. On a warm summer day of languishing in the grass, grunting, stretching out our tiny legs, and looking for freckles, noticing all the smallness in life, we caught each other's eye. Mischief. We stood up. I considered our options. Nothing suitably dangerous was within eyesight, so we walked towards her house. There had to be something going on in there. I think Kristen was one of at least 5 girls. I wasn't quite sure. 5, 7, it was large and uneven. That's what I remember about that number. They were stair-stacked, the girls. The oldest was the tallest, and the corresponding height and age descended at the same rate. Kristen was the youngest and the smallest. They were all ghostly pale with blonde hair. They were in constant movement, the girls, always aflutter. When we entered the house, into the dark wood kitchen, they were flitting around. Food was on the counters, just left there. Peanut butter out, jar opened, peanut butter falling slowly from the butter knife. The bread bag was open, and some slices of an off-brand Wonder Bread lay halfway out the cellophane. There were drinks, Tupperware, utensils, books, scissors, laundry, pencils, purses, book bags. Every surface was covered. One sister stood at the sink, washing dishes. The others darted around. The dish sister was lamenting about being the only one to do the dishes. She stood frowning, looking out the small window that had a view of the parking lot. More frowns. She had her blonde hair, the darkest of the blondes, pulled back in a kerchief. She had wide-bottomed light blue jeans and a tight striped T-shirt with a contrasting white collar. She looked earthier than the other sisters, the ones that oscillated around the kitchen. They had a separate rhythm. It was teen culture in motion. They laughed, smiled, teased, and antagonized in a way that was zesty. They hurried out, one off to babysit and the other running to the drugstore. Beautiful to behold, they left a stream of human girl debris in their wake. Frowning Sister shouted out some brief commands. If anyone listened to her, I didn't notice. I moved past her swiftly, chasing at Kristen's heels as she darted up the beige carpeted stairs. We caught our breath on the landing, laughing, breathing hard, doubled over, our toes gripping the carpet. We had made it past the Frowning Sister that was forced to be the mother. Our breath slowed, our eyes locked. We slowed our breath more and turned our heads. We were standing in front of the door to Many Older Sister's room. Mischief. We could feel the glow of it seeping out of the cracks around the door. We moved closer to the door, closer. Our bodies touched, hips bouncing and colliding off each other as we pressed our ears to the door to hear if there was a sister in there. We heard stillness. It was deafening, the absence of the abundant sound of female. We leaned into the door, slowly pushing it open, then tumbling in, climbing over piles of laundry at the fronts of dressers and ends of beds. There was shit everywhere. Hair dryers, hair curlers, curling iron, makeup, brushes, perfume, socks, panties, bras, hoodies, jeans, maxi pads. Shit was everywhere, like an explosion of teenage girls. I scanned every item with wonder and curiosity. My curious feet floated me across the floor to the lower dresser. Makeup. As my curious little hands lift and reach, Kristen grunts and shoots me a look. Brows low. She is serious. She is never serious. This is sacred ground. I back away. When I sweep my eyes around the room, I realize that there are multiple twin beds in a row, perfect for jumping. And I run to the center one, grasping the wooden knob at the end of the bed. I fling myself on the bed. Kristen leaps up with me at the first moment that she senses my plan. Jumping from unmade bed to unmade bed, kicking clothes and pillows and diaries. We are frenzied, rolling around like puppies over one another, grabbing hands, standing up, laughing, holding hands, jumping, falling down and rolling, over and over. Sensory chaos at its finest. The room was crowded with perfume smells, fabrics, glass and plastic bottles, clothes, everywhere clothes. At least 3 dressers ran across the wall at the foot of the beds, jammed together, dripping with drugstore products. Hours of babysitting money turned tangible. Then we spied it. On the tall boy, to the left, a soft-shaped George Jetson-looking bottle. We stopped jumping. The room became still. Our eyes focused on this mythical item. Roll-on. Tickle roll-on in pink. The shiny, rounded, glowing pink top called us. We had to touch it. The inner hourglass shape. The clear exterior with the cascading dots. We must touch it. After all, staying drier is nicer with a little tickle. Again, we synced up. We moved as one, swiftly, making as many gleeful childhood noises as possible. We grabbed, pawed, caressed the bottle, then twisted off the top. Giggling, we rolled the ball with our fingers. Kristen had baby hands. They still had fat on the back of them. They were dimpled and pudgy. I think perhaps she was younger, and her family had simply lied about her age to get her into school earlier. Free daycare. As our laughter increased, we went wild with the roll-on. We put it all over each other's arms, rolling the smooth, cool, wet ball all over our arms and legs. We barely heard the loud, angry thumping of the Frowning Sister, but we knew she was there the instant she flung the bedroom door open. She was enraged. She scanned the already disastrous room that we had made even worse. She was pissed. It was her roll-on. We had used it at least halfway up, rolling it on our little bodies in sensory glee. Frowning Sister radiated heat. She grabbed the roll-on, shouting at us. We froze. She tossed the roll-on, and it skidded across the crowded tops of the lower dresser, taking down nail polish remover, lotions, and other debris until it stopped. She turned, enraged, and ran down the stairs. We paused and looked at each other frozen. Then we heard her loud, fast feet on the carpeted stairs. We went to the landing, and her face, it was red and twisted. She looked half human. She had a large kitchen knife in her hand, and she was coming for us. We could not run back into her bedroom. There was no way to maneuver in that clutter. Kristen darted. I followed. We were small and quick. They kept dodging her on the landing as she lunged with the knife at us. The knife would land in the wall, the door, the carpeted step, and we ducked, dashed, and shrank. It was a frenzy, all instinct and motion. We rolled into another bedroom. We scrambled up and across a queen-size bed. Frowning sister was fast to follow. Kristen and I stood together at the head of the bed. There was a large painting with a wood frame behind us, some type of style of like Bob Ross. As we leaned against it, the wood frame would bump against the wall. Every time we flinched, thud. Frowning sister was frantic at the foot of the bed, raising the knife high over her head and plunging it into the mattress. Kristen and I reached for each other's hand. We intertwined our fingers, our hot little palms melting together, the knife plunging. The flinch, thud, every time she moved closer to us. Plunge, flinch, thud. The room was dark except for a sliver of late afternoon sun that was cutting through a center gap in the dark curtains. Dust was softly settling. I looked at this bedroom that I had never entered. A pale layer of dust on the nightstand, a soft layer of dust filtering through the one shaft of light. The room was deserted. It was the mother's room, but there was no trace of a mother, just a dark, stale vacancy. The knife raised, flinched, thud. There was no place left to go. She was edging closer. She raised the large knife above her head, and then, with the same flourish and flutter from earlier in the kitchen, the oldest sister came in and deftly grabbed her sister's wrist. In that one single moment of touch and contact, frowning sister crumpled. The knife just fell away. The older sister lay over her, placing her chest across her sister's back as she heaved and sobbed with no control, and the room filled with the sadness of remorse and a spirit of brokenness. Kristen and I turned and looked at each other. We slowly slipped off the bed, like two little dewdrops. We slipped like water past the sisters. As I turned to leave, I saw the oldest petting the hair of frowning sister, soothing, not speaking, petting, shushing, covering her sister with her body. There was no fight, just a surrender to grief. In the 2 years that I played with Kristen, slept at her house, and had her sleep at mine, went to school with her, made mischief with her, there was no mother, only sisters. I never saw a mother. That day in her mother's room, where it was obvious that no one lived, that nothing had been put down or picked up in quite a long time, I had a palpable experience with strain, the breaking point of a group of young girls raising themselves and each other, and little Kristen like a semicolon, a pause between thoughts. She was untethered, free, a brief point in time. Kristen moves very shortly after that incident. I looked in the mail daily for a letter from her, then weekly, monthly, yearly. But I had lost her. She never came back for me. Was she safe? Where did she go?